We should be live. Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. This is In the Bag, episode 3, I believe. It has been a uniquely busy week for me, so I didn't get to dedicate quite as much time to reading as I would have liked, and certainly not as much time as I would have liked to thinking about what it was that I read. That said, I made it farther into Dune, and I had the opportunity to watch the Dune Part 1 movie with my dad, which was enjoyable. It was his first time seeing it, and he wasn't uniquely interested in seeing it. So I think he had some unique insight. We'll see if I can relay it accurately or not. And then I made a little bit of progress. I won't say good or bad progress, but progress on the Vortex Dimensions short story. And I think for that, it might be best if I just like do updates on how it's going rather than trying to write on stream. Because I find that when I'm thinking and when I'm imagining and so on, I tend to get quiet, which is not, I think, best for a live stream. Who knows? Anyway, where last we left off in Dune, Paul and Jessica are heading off without Duncan, Idaho. And Jessica is reeling from the Harkonnen revelation, the revelation that she is a Harkonnen. That's right. Spoilers, of course, for Dune. If you haven't read it, turn away if you don't want to be spoiled. And then we get Thufir and several Atreides soldiers. Some are wounded and they're meeting with the Fremen. He tries to negotiate an alliance in exchange for help. The Fremen, we learn here, are shockingly good at killing Sardaukar, and that's something that's supposed to be extremely impressive. They managed to kill several hundred and only lost 3 men in the process. A wounded soldier dies, and the Fremen will remove his water, and they're sort of cultural barriers here, and that's something that's a bit of concern for Thufir. And I'm going to talk a bit more about him when we get to the part where I talk about my experience having watched the movie now and having read most of the events in the book. Anyway, there in this particular chapter, there are a lot of cultural barriers that are present in Thufir's mind. One of the Fremen suicide bombs a carrier, and Hawait is captured. An excellent chapter, an exciting chapter. I like Thufir. He is still very hung up on this idea that Jessica was the spy, I think. And where that goes is really interesting. Paul, Jessica, and Duncan, Idaho. Turns out it was Duncan, Idaho, showing up at the end there of the cliffhanger of that particular chapter when they determined to leave without him. They go to meet up with Kynes. Kynes is very wary of Paul, but Paul expertly offers loyalty for loyalty with the goal of making Arrakis habitable. Paul explains his plan to marry the Emperor's daughter, and this was fascinating. It's like the author is saying, "Hey, because he did this in chapter 2 with the Harkonnen revealing his plan. We as the audience essentially know this is what's going to happen." And it's still it's such a it's like it's not spoiling it. It's like, how is this going to play out, and what is, because this is also tragic and difficult. it's just the process of going through it, even knowing where it leads. And I think that is something that is very poignant to Paul and what Paul is dealing with, because he has that prescience, I think it's called, that he can see the future, so he knows, and he just has to go through it. It's a really fascinating effect that it's had on me as I'm going through the book. Anyway, he explains his plan to Kynes to marry the Emperor's daughter. They're attacked. Duncan Idaho is killed, and they split from Kynes and escape and have to ride out a windstorm. Baron Harkonnen, and as evil and villainous as he is, he might have all of my favorite chapters in the book. He is a really fun villain for me to experience. Baron Harkonnen intends to win over Hawait. I wrote, good plan. Dangerous, but good. It's going to be a tough thing to do. I'm going to be very curious to see. We'll get to the movie, but none of this stuff is in the movie with Thufir, so I have no clue what's going to happen with that, and that's exciting. I'm really enjoying Harkonnen's thoughts about Raban, about possibly misjudging him, etc. Raban is smarter than he seems. Right, so this is, I think, where we first meet Raban. And the Baron has these denigrating thoughts about him. He's this meathead. He's not currently fat, but he's going to be, which is rich coming from the Baron. But nevertheless, he thinks of him as a meathead, this dumb guy. But Raban seems to be asking poignant questions throughout all of this. He definitely has a sadistic streak to him, but he's not an idiot. And the Baron wonders at various points if he's misjudged him. And that's a really interesting dynamic. And it makes me want to know a little bit more about what's going on in Raban's head. Paul and Jessica survive the sandstorm and make their way to the Fremen. Jessica is afraid of Paul, which is somewhat understandable, I think. She has some very sad thoughts based off of the lineage revelation that she has, wondering if Paul must hate her or something, which is sad to read. And I really, really like Jessica quite a lot, so it's a bit sad to see that. And it's at this point I rewatched Dune Part 1, and I enjoyed it. It's amazing how much they kept in, but also notably, it was notable what specifically was missing. Yui had very few scenes, and there was no knowledge. They completely cut the Who's the Traitor storyline, which I think really changed the viewing effect and the reveal. I think my dad said something to the effect of, gosh, I really don't want to misrepresent what he said, but it was something to the idea of it's a standard story. These are the bad guys. These are the good guys. The good guys are going to fight against the bad guys. And I guess he didn't feel as much tension as folks, as some might hope for. And I think by removing the Who's the Traitor storyline, they lost a lot. The thing is, it's like a 2.5 hour movie, if not more. I don't know how they would have managed to get all of that in. I wrote in my notes they completely removed Hawait's story, and if I recall correctly, he doesn't show up in part two. Again, it removed so much dynamic. There was a big focus, I think, on Paul's relationship with Duncan, Idaho, and with Gurney, with his father. All good. When Leto just shouts out, "They've tried to take the life of my son," uh, which is clearly from that chapter in the book where he keeps repeating that mantra to himself. Really wonderfully done. Let's see. So much was left to subtlety in terms of the Harkonnen plot and the Emperor's involvement. Knowing the plan at the start of the book changes every interaction. Yeah, so this goes back to what I was saying a little bit before about Paul detailing his goal to marry the Emperor's daughter. You don't know the Harkonnen plan at the beginning, and it changes because I think it gives you a little bit less of a why we are watching this feeling, if that makes sense. I still found it incredibly enjoyable, and it's an incredibly uh, well done movie. I'm in no way complaining. I'm just noting that those are substantial differences in the experience. Uh, let's see. I think it may have been wise not to share that in the movie, but I sincerely wish they had kept the spy storyline. Yeah. So uh, I I think it's wise. I think it is good that they didn't reveal the specifics of the Harkonnen plan in the movie. But the Hawait thing felt like a big loss. I There wasn't as much life to Arrakis in the movie. We didn't get that dinner scene, which means we didn't get much by way of what are the other cities and towns on Arrakis, who's the head of the smugglers, who's the head of these varying factions. It was very much specifically focused on the Atreides, the Harkonnens, and the Fremen. But again, it's such a big movie, and it kept so much in. Where would the time have been to do it? So I don't fault the movie at all for it. On the Life of Arrakis comment, I'd add that without the dinner scene, the politics of the planet, that's more or less what I just said. And for as long as the movie was, it all moved very quickly, I would add. Yeah. At the time of writing this, I haven't gotten to Jamis in the book, and that's accurate. That remains accurate, rather. I still have not gotten to that point. At the time of writing this, I haven't gotten to Jamis in the book yet, but I suppose I was a bit puzzled why his visions showed a friendly Jamis versus the Jamis he fought and killed. I can imagine why that was the case, meaning the various possibilities of the future. But I can't think of a concrete reason. So it's a bit of a mystery of the film, I think, and I don't recall it being spoken about in part two. But I will rewatch part two soon, and maybe by next week I'll be able to talk about that a bit. We get to now back to the book. That was our nice little diversion into the movie. But to get back to the book, we get a Gurney chapter, which I enjoyed tremendously. Poor Gurney wants revenge, and he ends up signing up with the smugglers. The head of the smuggler faction wants to temper Gurney's need for vengeance, I think that vengeance could uh, lead to poor choices. And the head of the faction, Tuek, I think it is, um, despite the fact that his own father died, he's trying to remain tempered and make smart decisions, play the long game, not the short game, which is wise. And ultimately, Gurney signs up with them, and one of his comrades is dying, and Gurney sings a song, which was a very, very sweet moment. Paul and Jessica travel through the desert and they finally meet Stilgar. Also, I enjoyed the passage where Jessica was buried and they had to dig out her backpack. Yeah, so that was a neat uh, action scene, I guess. Is there was a sand avalanche, and the two get briefly separated. Jessica goes into not a coma, a meditation, and in the process she loses her gear, and Paul uses his compass and the spice to, I guess, wet some of the sand so that he can dig down and search for it. It was a very tense interaction. Uh, and then Stilgar appears. Now, I think there's starting to be a little bit of talk about the life of Arrakis, the vultures, the mice, the little bits of greenery, and I don't recall up to this point in the book much mention of that. And I think it's noteworthy. I think it means something, though. Again, I haven't had much time to really do a deep think on what it means that, literarily speaking, whatever that may mean, into uh, what it could mean that suddenly Dune, Arrakis, has life, more so than perhaps initially thought. Um, and then we get the Kynes chapter, and I loved the father element of the chapter. He's been put stranded in the desert by the Harkonnens to die, and he keeps hearing his father talk to him and teach him. And he's like looking for his father, but he can't quite see him, which is so tragic. He's thinking about his Fremen. He's hoping that the Fremen will come and rescue him. The vultures are circling overhead. He's hoping that the Fremen will notice that and choose to investigate, if nothing else, to try to get some water. Sadly, that never happens. And this chapter gave us a lot of insight into Kynes and his goals, the process it would take to terraform Dune into a paradise with more water. We get a little bit, I think, about the relationship between the worms and the spice. And I wrote down a quote: "No more terrible disaster could befall your people than for them to fall into the hands of a hero." And to my knowledge, that's the story. That's what Frank Herbert was trying to encapsulate with this story, is the false messiah, the dangers of idolizing one man or something to that effect. I'm not tremendously educated on his specific goals, but I think that, in effect, is what I've heard. And that's as far as I made it into Dune this week. Not quite as far as I would have liked because of a busy schedule, but I will continue with that this week. Now, I did say I made it a bit farther into Vortex dimensions. So let me see if I can pull that up, the notes. Boom, yes. So we had some brainstorming ideas, which were, I see, poorly uh, structured. Uh, I wrote Speedrun Summit, a yearly convention where speedrunners compete in varying categories. This particular year, it's sponsored by Plasma League Gaming, an esports organization. Names are a big deal for me. I'm quite terrible at coming up with them, but once I do get a good name, it helps me imagine them or make them more real. I messed around with some prose stuff. None of this will ultimately be used, but I was just testing some stuff. A panoply of colors danced across angry drumsticks computer screen. We'll get into it in just a little bit, but I gave Seth a handle. A panoply of colors danced across angry drumsticks computer screen. Asteroids zoomed by. An avatar flew through space. Large golden numbers shifted on a side screen. 123, 16, 17, 18. The sound of Angry's Fitbit beeping because of his elevated heart rate was drowned out by the sounds of notifications, donations to subscribers proclaiming with glee. All these distractions became white noise in the face of a looming world record. So then I decided to flesh out some character stuff and some world building stuff. So far I've got Seth Angry Drumstick Thompson. He is a 22-year-old speedrunner on string.com. I don't know if it's gauche or not just to use Twitch or YouTube or actual names, so I'm trying to sort of come up with reasonably believable fake names. He attends community college studying programming. He works part-time at the college coffee shop but contemplates becoming a full-time streamer. Leaving his job at the coffee shop would be difficult because that work grants him access to scholarships that help him pay for school, housing, etc. He's been speedrunning Vortex Dimensions for roughly 1 year, although that's relatively new to the game. He's improved quickly. He currently holds number 7 on the leaderboard in the 100% category with a runtime of 1:30:42. By comparison, the current world record is 1:25:13. One of the draws of Seth's channel is his programming background allows him to explain fluently why various skips and glitches exist in the game and how they are used in the speedrun. He comes from a low-income family. He's closer with his younger sister, or rather, he's close with his younger sister, 15-year-old Sarah Thompson. Suffers from low self-esteem and will frequently put others' needs ahead of themselves. Then we've got Sarah Thompson. Sarah's 15. She has a part-time job at a local bookstore. She loves her brother. She's a mod on his channel, but isn't much of a gamer herself. We'll get into it a little bit, but I was thinking about having her help pay to get Seth to LA for the competition. But we'll get to that in a moment. And then just working on coming up with names. We've got Cliff, who goes by the handle Bismuth, whatever that means, and Josh Taco Meat 6, and they will be our moderators. So then I wanted to do a bit of world building for the game itself. I don't love the name Vortex Dimensions, so I might try and come up with something better, but for the moment it's the working name. Vortex Dimensions is a space-themed platformer that came out in 1994. It follows the adventures of an alien called Gizmo. Gizmo looks vaguely frog-like, neon green, and has a jetpack and purple spacesuit. His girlfriend has been kidnapped and taken to another dimension by his rival, Jax. Traveling between dimensions requires movement through vortex portals. Vortex portals require energy. Each dimension that Gizmo travels through, he has to gather enough energy crystals to power the portal. While doing so, he can scan local dimensions to make scientific advancements to his suit. Not all dimensions are friendly. There are a plethora of bad guys that Gizmo will have to fight. Some of those bad guys are local to the dimension. At other times, they are henchmen sent by Jax to slow down Gizmo's progress. Gizmo has a team of friends and fellow dimension travelers that are always ready to lend a helping hand. Birdie, Thrush, Bopper, and Grump. So that's what I got so far for the game itself. I think it sounds like a fairly standard retro platforming game and plot with goals. We've got Speedrun Summit. This stuff in the red, I ended up cutting. I think you'll see why in a little bit. But it has to do with how I want the competition to proceed. Anyway, Speedrun Summit is a yearly convention held at a hotel in Los Angeles. The summit lasts Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so it's a 4-day event. When I had initially started writing this, I figured I could schedule the Thursday and Friday for casual speedrunners to run games on stream while they explain the process for the specific games that they are speedrunning. And then Saturday and Sunday would be the competition. Again, ultimately, that's been cut. The goal of Speedrun Summit is to raise money for various charities through donations, and this year they are sponsored by Plasma League Gaming. Plasma League Gaming started as a competitive esports team. Their original team won the world championship in the first-person shooter Warfare Carnage. Since then, the organization branched out to several games, sponsoring speedrunners, and even getting a content house. This year, they are sponsoring the Speedrun Summit and have promised to recruit several speedrunning champions from the event into their organization. So I tried to do a quick outline's not quite the right word here. Let's call it a summary. And then I bullet pointed a few questions that I need to ask myself in more detail. So Seth, a speedrunner, enters and needs to win a speedrunning competition to be recruited into a major esports organization so that he can afford to go full-time as a speedrunner and continue to pay for college. I need to figure out why this matters and what the deeper motivation is. However, his chances of winning the competition are reduced dramatically when his equipment breaks down, preventing him from being able to practice for the speedrun. Then some questions I wrote out were, what is Seth's flaw? And then I added a line in his bio about low self-esteem and putting others before himself. Again, that's probably going to be where the sister comes in at some point. Maybe he lets his schoolwork slide. He doesn't want to be a programmer. Maybe he loses his job, which costs his scholarship. So these are just a bunch of maybes that I'm trying to sit with. Despite several setbacks, Seth is able to impress Plasma League Gaming, and while he may not win the competition, he ends up getting a job either with Plasma League Gaming or Speedrun Summit and is able to continue schooling while working a job that he loves. So that right there makes me think he's just unhappy with his coffee job, and that's probably going to lead into the why does it matter and what's the deeper motivation. He's working a job that he doesn't like to pay for school, and he would rather work a job that he does like. Relatively simple. So then I made a bullet point list of things I know, and I'm hoping that as I work on the plot, this bullet point list will help me develop that plot more. So, what do we know about the story so far? The computer breaks. He learns about a speedrun summit, or already knew of it. Perhaps he's already training for it. That's kind of where I'm leaning right now. Debates whether or not it's worth continuing if he can't practice, resolves to figure out a way to practice, possibly goes into debt or misuses scholarship money. I like that one. Misuses scholarship money to buy new gaming equipment, creating a need to win prize money to balance all of that out. Needs to afford travel to Los Angeles for the competition, feels he can't do it. His sister helps and encourages him to go. Meets the shoo-in to win the competition, the current world record holder, and that character who I need to start developing. I wrote, he's cringe AF. So that's going to be fun. He plans how to win the competition. Perhaps he practices some unsafe strategies, risky RNG dependent strategies. He starts off strong, eliminating his first opponent in the competition. Note, is it where they compete 1v1, or is it just that everyone races for the fastest time? Answer, the latter, but he only just scrapes by, avoiding being eliminated. Right, so I have to actually design the competition itself. So it's not going to be, I think, a 1v1. It will be everyone does their best race, and whoever comes out with the slowest time gets eliminated. I think that's a reasonable way to do that. I need to add something subplotty. Perhaps his sister shows up. Day 2 of the competition, he loses because of bad RNG and using risky strats, but it comes to light that one of the other competitors cheated and has to be kicked out, allowing Seth to rejoin the competition. So I think it would be very interesting to see him lose. The problem there being, it's like, how do you get him back in? And I'm a little worried that having another character be kicked out for cheating feels a little Deus Ex Machina-y. And that is another issue that comes up later with the RNG, the random number generator, of the speedrunning dynamic. So I have to figure that out. Seth has a low point. Develop this more. I don't want him to try cheating as well. Maybe he commits to only using safe strats, but that guarantees he won't be able to outright win the competition. But when the world record holder falls behind, Seth commits to risking the RNG. And then I wrote that Deus Ex Machina note to myself, that concern. Somehow he realizes his low self-esteem has been holding him back, and he vows to be more confident moving forward. Does the RNG strat and ends up coming in second place. Although he didn't win the competition, he feels proud that he tried. He impressed Plasma League Gaming, and they offer him some sort of paid internship. And then just a final note, I need to add more subplot and things in between each day of the competition for him to do. So that is everything that I came up with this week for Vortex Dimensions. And that is as far as I made it in Dune. I think that's all I've got to share. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week. Subscribe to that darn Kitte if you get a chance, because she's got a great channel. And we'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.